And I'm actually going to get right into it. And you really want to know how. How can I blaze my own path? How can I be successful? How can I follow the path that someone else has laid for me to be successful?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 229 of Campus Cuts. Today, I have a special guest. I have a fellow entrepreneur, a restaurant owner, somebody who's actually a very up and coming and big in the Waco community that I am now meeting for the very first pleasure. We connected on Instagram after he posted Jamarcus's episode and saying that he enjoyed it. So welcome to the show, Devin. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What an honor.
No, it's an honor for me. And I honestly just want to say thank you so much for making the time, because that is the most valuable currency, especially you as an entrepreneur, just to be able to be on here.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to be here.
Man, that's amazing. So, of course, this is a free-form. Campus Cuts is a multi-generational, multicultural show talking about with getting guests from all walks of life, whether students, faculty, staff, or just people in the community, just to be able to talk it up and chop it up about life. And yeah, man, you after seeing you on Instagram just repost my episode with Jamarcus, that meant a lot. And I just love what you always say and how you share your story, especially how you always share about principles with Ray Dalio. That's somebody that I look up to, and that's a great book that I recommend any leader to be able to read. And you're always posting that. And so, yeah, Devin, tell us about yourself, man. Like, for my first question for you is like, what is your name? What year you graduated Baylor? If I'm not mistaken, you did go to Baylor?
I did.
Yeah. What year you graduated your Baylor? Like your hometown, where you're living now, and where you're from, and what's your occupation?
Yeah. So I was actually born and raised in China. Came to the U.S. Moved from the city called Guangzhou. It's kind of close to Hong Kong. It's about 2-hour or 40-minute bullet train ride from Hong Kong. So I came to the U.S. I moved to Houston to be with my dad because he was like in medical research, and I was kind of struggling in school in China. I was, struggling. It was so competitive out there.
Right.
And I, since my dad was here, so he was like, might as well, have you be here and pursue, more opportunity. So the kind of like the typical immigrant story. So my actual name, a given name in Chinese, is called Teng, or my last name is Li, so it'd be Teng Li. So you probably have seen one of my recent posts, just kind of my journey. So my English name is Devin. But I guess I share that story later on. But so I moved to Houston at the age of 13. I enrolled into 8th grade at a like a local public middle school, and then went through high school in Houston. And Houston was a pretty diverse place. Yeah, so I went to Houston. I went through high school there, and I came to Baylor to study engineering. I was actually not Baylor was not my top choice.
Right.
Because I didn't have to write an essay. And then they waived my admission fee. I was like, man, I just got to pay $1 to, my lunch money to get my transcript sent, to the counselor, and then they would send it to Baylor, and then that's how I applied.
Right.
And I was planning to go to UT Austin because I heard they had a better engineering school program. But then I didn't get in. I got into this UT San Antonio program. And I was like, nah, forget it. Well, also I became a Christian when I was right before senior year. So I was just learning about God, and so at that point I was a Christian for about close to a year then. So picking a college is a big deal.
Right.
And so my mentor at that time, even though he went to UT Austin, but he said, well, Baylor's a good school, and it is a Christian Baptist school. So I just decided to go to Baylor, but I was actually thinking about transferring. My plan was to transfer out of Baylor. I was just going to start for a year, see how it goes. and then transferred to UT Austin. But my years at Baylor was pretty transformative. You know, I did learn a lot about God, and my relationship with God has changed, my identity in Christ, and all that good things. And then, but then after my first year, I had so much fun and had so many relationships, and I forgot about transferring. I remember having a realization is that way I was supposed to transfer, but then I forgot to. I was like, oh well. So, but that's kind of my brief story as far as how I came to Baylor and end up seeing Waco. But I kind of mentioned in my Instagram about how my little journey of accepting my given name again.
Right.
So right before Baylor, I started taking the identity as Devin, my English name. So I pretty much named myself as Devin.
Really?
A lot of Chinese immigrants or Chinese kids, especially from China, they would do that. They would give themselves like an English name. A lot of people would find it pretty cool. But how I came to the name Devin was because I really liked this basketball player in the NBA called Devin Harris, and he was playing for the Mavs at that time. And I thought he was super cool, and I like how he played, and I like the name Devin. It was pretty unique because there's a lot of Asian guys are named Kevins,
right.
and I want to be a Kevin, and so I'm a Devin. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's incredible. So not Kevin, but Devin. And on your Instagram post, that definitely I resonated with that heavily. So I'm a first generation American, meaning that my parents, they came over here and I was born like about 2 years after they came. And so but with that, I remember growing up not liking my name because everybody always used to they would either make fun of it or they say, because my initials is Tanaka, Ishana, Tava, so tit. They're like tit all the time. And I never, and I was like, why does my name sound so foreign? When even like my grandparents, like my mom had Tammy, my dad had Emmanuel, my grandmother had Abigail, my other grandmother had Dorothy, my auntie had Michelle, my uncles had Michael, all this, and I'm like, why am I and my siblings, we have Tanaka, Tamuda, Zuva, Nayai, Ivana, we have like different foreign names, and we're just like, what? And not falling that in love with that. So for you, it's like, when was the moment that you realized that I'm going to love my name again, and this is for who I am? Like, how was that process for you to be able to do that?
It was probably post-college, to be honest. It wasn't until way later after, which I can go into more in detail on the reason why. But it was pretty much I started rediscovering my Asian identity post-college. And I remember it was actually after I started dating my wife, and he just noticed a lot of behaviors I had weren't as, even though I'm like literally came from China, but there's a lot of behavior that I had just weren't there. So I remember my wife is kind of a third culture kid, born in the U.S., moved to Asia, came back again. So it was actually her that kind of helped me to rediscover some of my identity. And so to do that, I started wondering, what does my name even mean? But I knew this whole time. I knew what my name meant, but then I wasn't really fully accepting and taking it in. So I started I just started asking myself, what does my name mean actually? And I knew that it means to gallop like a horse, or you usually describe a horse galloping, or you describe a rocket, flying up, those kind of things. So then it was just kind of like a aha moment. I was like, maybe that's just a identity that God had given me. And I started like kind of digging into it and started taking in, and it's just kind of an aha moment, maybe a conversation with God, just kind of realizing I'm not gonna no longer run away from who God created me to be. Yeah.
That's really good. And then when did you graduate?
2008.
2008.
I came no, right. I came to Baylor in 2008. I graduated 2012.
Wow, wow, wow. That's a man. That's a what 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so now, how would you say? Have you ever had the chance to be able to go back to Baylor and see like the difference?
So I actually, throughout the years, past few years, my wife and I always been involved with international student ministry. So we were part of a local church that, intentionally reach out to the international students from China and stuff. So we always kind of, because it's so close, we're always in touch with Baylor.
Right. Did your wife go to Baylor?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that's where you guys met.
We met at Bible study. I was a senior on the way to leave. She was like sophomore, and we just met at a Bible study for international students.
Wow, that's awesome. Because when I look at it, like the international students bubble has definitely increased a lot over time. I know, especially like within the last couple of years, that just that increase of being like Baylor being really intentional with that. But I actually had a colleague named Carly. She worked in student government, and she did kind of relay information to me during the time when I was the director, deputy director of diversity at Baylor for student government. And she kind of directed me like, even though we have them here, there's still a lapse because one, there's a little bit of a communication barrier, but also once Baylor is able to get that quota, they don't necessarily do much with that. And I wanted to get your experience with that because my math teacher actually went to Baylor back in the 90s, and how she always remained like how always told me about how the Asian community was definitely very tight knit. You like whenever you see one, you see all of them or any of that nature. But then but she said it still felt like there wasn't enough that Baylor was doing, and that's why she transferred to UTA after she completed 2 years. So I wanted to get your perspective on that and. Why first our first question is like understanding like Baylor and their reaction and how they can continue to be one more intentional, and two, why is it the Asian community is always so tight knit whenever it comes, especially when people are coming out of the country into America.
And I can be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, in the Asian culture, because it's literally opposite from American culture in the sense of American people say all the time American culture is very individual. When individualism is very strong, so it's the very opposite in the Asian culture. We're more communal. It's almost like not like exactly, but people like to be blend in together. Nobody want to be this stand out and be the clown or be the outspoken person. So that's just not very present in the Asian culture, and especially in a culture that's not of your own.
Right.
So that's why you always see them together, and all the Asians are always together. That saying, it's because they really, it's just how we live. And I remember one time when I was a student, or even as a graduate, and I got invited to have lunch at like Pinland, and I just remember seeing these two, like a Chinese couple, and they got their own plate. Americans, we usually get their own plate.
Right.
I just witnessed this couple got 2-3 plates, and they were sharing it together.
Yes.
And it was a very kind of reverse cultural shock. I was like, well, yeah, that's just how Chinese people are. But then the American culture is almost weird.
Right.
Unless you intentionally say we're gonna share this together, but that's just part of Asian culture. So I believe there's about several hundreds of Chinese kids coming in. Well, I'm not sure about this coming year how that works, but at least about several hundreds of undergrad students coming in from China alone. Yeah, I think like you said, they let a lot of students in. So actually, my wife worked for Baylor temporarily as a therapist, and
Right.
she's one of the very few, maybe out of the two Chinese-speaking therapists in Waco, and she worked for Baylor temporarily. So even things like that, I don't think Baylor necessarily prepare for it, because it's like kind of what you said, met the quota, But then when you're hiring several hundreds, over the years you become 1,000, you're kind of responsible for them, for their mental health, for their just all kinds of aftercare type of work for them. But I think that's an area that Baylor should grow in.
And I think also like in the world, like especially because that is definitely so true. Because I personally, this past year, I roomed with two international students who happened to come from China, and broke bread with them, enjoyed with them, sat with them, got a chance to sit down. And every night, I'm telling you, every night they would always cook together. All of them would cook together, sit down, talk and laugh, watch TV, enjoy. And I mean, that's very present in my family as well. But I mean, of course, as life goes on and people start getting busy, but it's just, it was actually really refreshing because my high school I came from, one of my best friends, Andrew, I'm always at his house, always talking, always sitting down, eating, breaking bread with them. It was kind of really refreshing to be able to feel that again and be in that type of environment, a home away from home. But when I was talking with them and asking them like, hey, how has it been being at Baylor? How has it, like, have you felt like you belong? They're like, they just look at me weird. They just look at us weird. They or they kind of ignore us, or they see that we're here, and then after that they don't necessarily aren't taking that next step to be more intentional about that. And especially, to be quite honest, the rhetoric that has been happening on with our president has definitely definitely defamed and changed that a lot. So I just wanted to get your opinion and your option about that. Like, you living in this current time, especially during the COVID-19 crisis when it was first popping up. How was that for you and your family? And then how was that for you with your community as well within the church?
Yeah, so I think kind of like it's kind of like what you shared about your roommates or former roommates. I actually brought a lot of some emotions out. That's actually kind of our story being citizens of Waco, or even being young adults. We went to Baylor. I actually worked in Houston for a little bit, and I came back to be with my wife, and we're dating, and then got married and stuff. That's actually pretty much our story being in Waco, and we speak the language. We know about football. We know the culture. We know the American culture, per se. Even so, we struggle with exactly what your friends just shared. That's so much of our life, and so we were part of this church we were part of before, and we just struggle so much finding community and finding food, living like finding diverse food was a problem, and grocery store was a problem, but one of the biggest part exactly what your friend just shared, what you shared, that we just really struggle, just kind of overlooked. So it's actually one of the main reasons why we started Waco Child, or even when we talk about creating community, even diverse community. That's one of the main reasons why we even started that journey. But I think to answer your question, during the COVID, I think there's a lot of anti-Asian crime or hateful crime against Asian. So I remember my wife was kind of really scared about me going out during that time, because we were still operating out of a truck, like
Right.
a mobile T truck. And I remember my wife sharing she was often have fear about me, facing some sort of hate crime or something, which some of our friends did, but I personally didn't really deal with anything directly. Um, so that was, yeah, that was something that I had to be prepared to say something, if I mentally be prepared if somebody says something racist to me.
Mm.
That was when something I had to like prepare myself, so I don't be in shock or something.
Right. And you said like, so your friends actually were met with that racism. That's wow. Especially like in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Man. But I mean, but despite that, that is amazing. And now, definitely want to, of course, go into your entrepreneurial journey with Waco Child. Like, how did you start that? What was the idea? Why did you first take that chance of becoming an entrepreneur or a business owner? and the purpose behind it. He's talked about like, you wanted to, of course, to be able to create a community, but like, yeah, the story, like how, why?
Yeah. So kind of what you share, we really struggle finding community being Waco. And sometimes community, people confuse community with people you know.
Right.
Not always like that. You can know a ton of people, but you still feel lonely and not feel seen. So that's kind of our story. And we're part of a large church. We went through kind of life group after life group trying to find a place. And we would just struggle every semester or every a few months. We would find ourselves being at the kind of like the small group fair kind of deal that the former church hosted. So and as Asians, food and drinks holds a really important role.
Mm.
That's what our parents have done, and it just grew up in that culture. That's just all you do. If you want to create a relationship, you want to talk about business or talk about anything, you invite them over for dinner. So, and that's just all we knew. I mean, what else are we gonna do? And so we started inviting people over for dinner and for food and for tea. Tea is something that we enjoy at night. And so, but that's hard too, because in American culture, you invite somebody, you don't get them invite back. That's a real issue that people go through, just finding friends. And yeah, so we're just really at a lonely point. So we did a few, did a lot of those, invited people over, and, we didn't always get an invite back. But we made some friends along the way and whatnot. So I studied engineering, and then through just God's opening doors, I became an engineering teacher at a local high school.
Right.
It's one of the Waco SD high school. The majority of the students I had were Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I spent about 4 years there, just learning about the Hispanic culture, and just fell in love with my local students. So over time, I would hear what's going on in their lives and stuff. So my wife at that time, we were like really actively, engaging with the local businesses. Whenever there's a new business, we're there. We're gonna check it out, take pictures, post online. And I think one day I was in class just kind of talking about what's going on downtown, hoping that would be interesting to hear. And their response was, "I never heard of this place." And I tried another few places, like at least every Baylor student would know. And they're like, "Nope, never heard of it." And then I was kind of in shock in the sense of like, what? It's like right there. It's like, how do you not go there? And a few of them really struggle to voice it out because they don't have the language for it.
Right.
And then finally one kid said, well, those downtown and those places are for white people.
Right.
And I was like, whoa. I mean, it's like shocking to hear, but it's like in my mind as a person of color, it's like, oh, I get it. And, of course I get it. You go to a shop, nobody look at you, everybody's looks different from you. And you're like, whoop, I feel out of place. And it just happens to be where I went to Baylor. I was always around in the white culture, and I know how to behave, how to speak, how to act.
Mm-hmm.
I was used to it. So when my student said that, and I certainly hit a spot, and just like, okay, it really saddened me because it's like, man, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, and bubble tea was just something we really loved and enjoyed. And at that time, there's really no good bubble tea. And there's some places that served it, but it was just kind of powder, not really high quality. And I really care about our health, and so we're gonna do organic, premium way. So the idea was just like, and we were a frequent visitor at the farmers market. So I had the idea, man, I'm gonna sell boba at the farmers market,
Right.
see how it goes. So I actually did that and that's why make entrepreneurship so hard. Sometimes you don't have the product.
Right.
I spent about a year just trying to make it at home, and then I always let my wife try it. I would get so excited and let her try it. I was like, no, not good enough. And so about like almost a year later, I was still thinking about it. And even my wife was like, "Wait, you still thinking about that? You still want to do that?" And I would feel hurt, but I think so what I started doing now is I make a cup of tea every single day.
Right.
I don't know where I'm going, but I'm just going to make a little step every single day. And over time, when you're persistent, you just find things. You know, people tell you recipe, and you just find out stuff online, and boom! Finally, a year and a half later, I feel like I finally have a good product. I launched it, and yeah. So, um, and when we launched a product, we knew we want to address the problem of community, lack of community, and we know that we weren't alone. We knew that we weren't alone. It's like it's gotta be a very normal problem that a lot of people go through, and so, and then with what my students have said, that encounter, I was like, I really want to create a diverse community through the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's just kind of yeah, that's how it came around.
Wow. And then so like, how long did it take for you to be able? So you said it took about a year to be able to get that right, and I'm starting with that cup of tea. And then so now with entrepreneurship, everybody is like, yay, woohoo, it's fun. Everybody's like, oh wow, it's amazing. But you know that it's hard.
Mhm.
It is very hard. So how long did it take for you to finally be satisfied and like saying like, okay, we got something here. We are here. We're doing it.
I say about this year.
Really?
About a few months ago when we finally got a store. It's only about 2 months old, less than 2 months old.
Okay.
We just finally feel like, oh, we finally what you're saying. Yeah, it takes that long.
It's a long. And then so what you said, what year did you start making the tea?
2016, 17.
2016, 2017. Now it's like now you're 3 years in, you opened the store. Man. And most people like to be able to get that rental property or to find a place to open the store, find a place of how to get the community in there. That's a lot. And so like how for you as an entrepreneur, you're able to one, give yourself grace and balance, and two, um, understand that it's going to get better.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question again?
Okay. Like, how do you know, as an entrepreneur, how do you know when to get better? When you know, like, okay, I got to go hard, and know, okay, I need to give myself grace. Because when most people, whenever they think about entrepreneurship, they don't realize that the mental health effects of it, because it's a lot of stress, especially when you're an owner or you're somebody that just opened it up and you're still trying to figure out your way.
Yeah. I think I mean, this is the thing called shame, and I felt like shame. Everybody goes through shame. Everybody experiences, and so especially when you fail, you experience. But also, so I actually before I started this, I read studied a lot of stuff called stuff researched by Brene Brown, and just kind of her research on shame and vulnerability, and the how to fix shame is just through vulnerability and whatnot. So early on, I just learned, from one of her research talks about how when people experience success can actually experience shame at the same time, because when you're successful, you're happy, you're not guarded, because you cannot have mental guard, just mental guarding yourself when you're experiencing success and happy. But she just talks about how when you're successful, you also experience shame. It's almost like cousins. You experience success, you experience shame, because success sometimes can feel stressful. We're not even made to experience that for a long time, because success is a very stressful thing. So, so her research helped me a lot, just kind of to balance just how to recognize my shame, because shame is not just like, oh, I made a mistake. Shame is like, I'm bad, I'm not worth it, I'm worthless, I have no value, and I'm just bad. So so that really helped me to having close friends and having just being even my own teammates, employees being vulnerable. Hey, I failed, and I'm sorry, and I can, I can always improve and kind of move on and become better. And instead of feeling like it's a shame, I'm just a failure, and those things. Those moments do come, but I'm very well aware of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good, really good. And understanding like, your owner, your boss, that in itself is not easy. So, what type of leadership style do you feel like that you develop, or that you try to employ for your people that work for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to be a coach and be a mentor and try to inspire. That's kind of where I find most comfort zone. Just helping people to comfort, to make them feel safe. That's one of my big thing. I really want to hold my employees to feel safe around me, and not experience shame or get shame by the leader. And I know there's a lot of that culture, around us. There's a lot of shaming hidden under success. So that's something, a principle that I try to do.
That's really good. And speaking on that, my one of my great friends, Beatrice, we met in middle school, and we're still friends today. One of the things that they don't necessarily talk about, 'cause she's Filipino. What she told me, like some from the Eastern Asian sense, is that shit, the idea and shame, especially with that pressure of always performing to the best. Like, our parents want us, like, if you're not going to be a doctor, if you're not going to be a lawyer, if you're not going to be an engineer, if you're not that, you are a failure. You do not get a good grade, you're done. I really think that every immigrant does experience that. So now for you, did you grow up in that type of environment, and how were you able to unlearn that thinking that, oh man, if I'm not doing my best, I'm done?
Yeah, I think yeah, I think that's definitely part of the immigrant culture, that pressure to perform. I would say actually I learned to. So that's another thing I think a really good thing that I learned in college. Even being around uh, a lot of the white church culture, just even things you're learning from theology, from church and stuff. That's one really good thing that I learned from the culture, is that I don't have to carry shame. And
Mm.
like that's actually a really good thing in the culture, the American culture, that that we don't have to experience shame, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. That is, I like that. I like how that, you don't have to necessarily carry it. They're like, if you fail, that's okay. And for you, when did failing become that one thing? I'm like, I'm happy that I failed. Do you learn more from your failures, or you learn more from your success?
I'll definitely learn more from my own failure. I mean, it's on and off. Some failures are like, but some failures are more devastating. Like even this week, I made a failure. I think I was kind of operating under a lot of stress, and I said a few things, and there's some things I didn't do, and that really ended up something that I have to really take care of and apologize to certain individuals and things like that. And it was a really good reminder of some of the flaws that I have, and not and be I need to be really aware of, because then under stress I could do things that I'm not aware of. So those are failures. It was just as hard, but also a really good lesson.
That's really, really good. That's really awesome. And just to be able to piggyback off of that, we understand principles of Ray Dalio. And the one thing, when also reading the book's originals by Adam Grant, when Ray Dalio was talking about Bridgewater Associates, he's able to make everybody feel comfortable to receive criticism that's constructive. And because, when you look at the structure and operation of American companies, like it kind of seems like the boss is untouchable. Like the boss can't do any wrong.
Yeah.
But Ray Dalio says, no, I do so many things wrong. And I want everybody to be blatantly honest and be able to be constructive about it, and be able to have a culture where we're able to call each other accountable and constructive and healthy means. So for you, like as an owner of a company, how do you try to do you have that culture surrounded in your office, in your workspace, and how you're able to do that every day in your life?
It's through relationship, and you gotta have the relationship with the employees. So I'll be vulnerable. I think one of the failure is that I have in the past few months is well, it's because of COVID. And my some of my employees, some employees I see more often, and some employees I don't see them as often, if at all, because some don't really need hours. They want the hours to given to somebody else. So there's some employees just we have not seen for a long time,
Right.
or just we haven't really gathered together and have team meetings for a long time. And then because of COVID and that, we had to think really creatively and keep our company going and surviving. And well, but we were able to thrive on it. But there was a big blind spot where even though as a company we talk about hosting community and creating community, so big blind spot is fostering community within our own team. It's
Mm.
not that like none of us trust each other, that kind of thing. We just haven't met for a while. I have not made initiative to Zoom call to, um, even though I talk to them, periodically, individual basis, but we really never had a group meeting, even just have a hangout time on Zoom or something like that. And that was a big blind spot. And I think it created some team members to feel a little isolated, kind of like lonely, but not lonely kind of deal. And I know it's a common thing, but then it's a failure that I had where someone feel a little isolated. And then, isolation can cause other things and whatnot. So yeah.
That's really good. And honestly, and I just want to say thank you so much. I really love how vulnerable and open that you are and open and sharing, because I get to learn from you. And I bet a lot of people will be able to learn from that, because, whenever we see like a company or something like, successful or something nice, most people, I think that's the one thing in the entrepreneurship culture that is not necessarily shared a lot is the failures. Is like, hey, we fail all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important for people to be able to embrace that, and rather than shaming and looking down, to be able to celebrate and say, okay, great. Now, what type of lesson can we learn from it, and how can we apply that in our own life, and everything else? So now my next question for you is like, how are you able to balance that lifestyle, as a husband, like, balancing marriage, because marriage is a commitment. It's awesome. But, managing like, hey, I love my wife. I need to make time for her. And also I need to make time for my work.
Yeah. So part of it, in a way that my wife and I'm lucky that we do get to work with each other and we talk about it all the time. So in a way, we often talk about in entrepreneurship, there's almost no work-life balance. Such a myth. Work-life balance is not really a thing. It's about fusing the two.
Right.
Who you are is who you are. Kind of like who you are is you're not fully your business, but your business is who you are. So that's something that we know going into it. So it's something that I think we do enjoy talking about it, and it brings a lot of life in that sense. Us being partners, and business partner, and also marital partners. So but also being vulnerable, that is not an area, even though we're not experiencing any marital problem or anything, but it is an area I think all husbands trying to grow, how to be intentional with with their wives. And so that's something definitely I need to grow. But I am actively trying to be aware, okay, how is my wife feeling, how she's doing. And so, but we do that a lot of time by just having some, I try to do yoga with her, because then you're not able to go out as much, and we don't really like spending that
Right.
much money. So I just knowing that I know what she likes, and I try to do those things with her at home. And by practicing yoga is one thing that she really enjoys. I know, kind of like quality time. So just kind of being mindful how she's feeling and all that stuff.
Okay. That's really, really good. That's great. That's awesome. And I can imagine like it's been ups and downs, especially now with the new um order by the governor for the business. And so how do you navigate like when of course we all know that entrepreneurship is uncertain, but in this level of certainty, how do you remain sane?
Yeah, I personally think it's a time of opportunity because it's kind of like back in the days when internet took over, and because I really think the businesses that are going to survive are the ones either really innovative and to figure out new ways, or the ones are just selling daily necessity and things like that. And I really try to tell every company that doesn't matter what they sell, and they're just like they're a tech company. It's whoever, however you do it, however post on social media, or even just having, perfecting ordering process. There's no frustration and those things. Because like right now it's a very stressful time. People are feeling all kinds of emotions and stuff. So I always tell my mentor, like business mentor, mentees, it's like whatever you sell, you must help people solve an emotional problem
Mm,
or frustration that they experience in whatever time they go through. So I know, like, even just now, my brother-in-law was having discussion about like ordering food from this place, and then he was just so frustrated about how this ordering process, how complicated it was, and how many multi steps. How do I know if the food order went through? So that's like a perfect example of like, because right now people don't go out, people have to order mobile, take mobile orders. So like these are perfect opportunities to be innovative and perfect your communication, and also humanize your company because there's so much emotions going on. I think the worst thing in companies is to stay silent.
right.
That's a lot of BLM movement and all the racial uproars thing. I think is a perfect time for company to be humanize themselves and offer empathy, and also to like transform the way they operate, and just really personalize what they're doing to the customers. And I think that's why I really think there's a good opportunity.
Mm. So, and I mean, of course, they do say that now we are officially in a recession, but they say um, out of millionaires are made during the recession. That's a
Yeah.
very thing. A very common theme. And I really do think that the next $1 million company, hoping me and my guys will be
Yeah.
one of them, are able to be able to come out from that, from this situation. Like, you look at it 2008, 2009, Airbnb or Uber,
Yeah.
Postmates, DoorDash.
Mhm.
They became innovative. They became in a way that is going to definitely do this. But I really do think that the next thing, I mean, what my mentor is telling me is AI, and especially
Take over.
it's about to take over. And and actually, I'm not sure if you watched John Oliver, last week tonight, but I do know that China is in the works that like definitely has a heavy, and the Chinese government has a heavily influence of AI and in the Hong Kong process and the facial recognition. And we see like, oh, that's so amazing, but we often can see the little bit of a sense of danger with that, like kind of similar to um I know China, dude, there was this guy interviewed, they have a Skynet,
Mhm.
and they said Skynet from the Terminator, like, but good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a real thing. And for me, being an educator for about 3-4 years, I noticed the education model in America is it's kind of like pretty much learn whatever you enjoy,
Right.
and happy education type of deal. Whatever you're happy, you do those things. And I think it's great. And we need those things. But then we also need the fundamental education, like basically learn about math, learn about science, pursue those higher scientific degrees and all those things, and develop new technology, and but I felt like U.S. education system is headed to that way, which is such a finite thinking. It's just we're so finite minded by finances and budgets and all those things, which are also cutting budget. And I put cutting educational budget is a sign of finite thinking, because they don't in other words, US is no longer valuing education.
Right.
And that's a very good sign of, along with many other signs of decline, because when a country or a culture doesn't value education, that's when it starts declining. And then with the current political movement where immigrants are not welcome, there's going to be a very big shortage of technological experts.
Right.
And so if no experts are coming in, it's going to be a big shortage. And because if your family is rich and whatever, and you're probably going to pursue finance, right? And there's not going to be less people pursuing, technological research and those things. And that's going to be a big problem in the long run. And the AI is going to take over after that because, so I think I do think the future of America is headed in the wrong direction, a very finite way of thinking. Because what made America great was its values, the
Right.
value of freedom, values of pursuing making the best thing and pursuing medical research and defeating disease and helping the poor. And in the 70s, 80s, when all the government programs are coming out, that's what made America great. But right now we're so finite-minded by protecting ourselves and from the terrorists and disliking the immigrants and all those things. So I feel like we're kind of headed in the very finite thinking way of doing things.
And I mean, and I think it is really a reflective of Mr. 45, our president, because he is a businessman and he wanted to be able to save budget and whatever. But some of the repercussions that is moving from that is definitely are going to be harmful. And then especially when his rhetoric is about saying okay, Kung Flu and China is bad, but and I just learned this out last week. And it's kind of funny because I think where America is at this point is it's reaching, in the way that I put it, is America's reaching its teenage years, and puberty, it's angst, because people got to realize that America's only 245 years old.
Yeah.
And you have other countries that have been here for generations and thousands. And that finite thinking, even when we talk about the conversation of generational wealth, we think in America, okay, my kids are going to be good. We're going to set this up. You got the big companies like the Koch family or oil, the Rothschilds, and all that. That's great. But China, when they think generational, I mean, they've been here China has been here for generations. And I just found that out whenever they write their business plans, they're writing 300 years in the future.
Yeah.
And that's powerful, but also whoa.
Yeah. That's part of the history. I think in the 70s and 80s, when the Russia, USSR, got taken down, and there's a whole world power shifting. And so I think with that time period, US realized, oh, we're the best. And they were the best. I think that time period developed a mindset, a very just like we're the best. And that mindset eventually, essentially is kind of like pride. Even though America did a lot of great things at that time, but I felt like that mindset really is hurting, America. Yeah.
Today. Absolutely.
You have a chance, you should check out this book called Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. He's kind of similar to Adam Grant, and the whole game the whole book talks about this thing called infinite game, kind of game theory. So infinite game, there's infinite game and finite game. So finite game is like a basketball. You got 60 minutes. Whoever wins and shoots most hoops, or the game runs out of time. That's how the game's over. So it's a very finite game. It's just very within rules. You can go out of bounds. Those things. You only get 5 people. Type of basketball game, right? But there's also an infinite game. Infinite games, the rules always changing. Okay, there's always new players coming in. There's always new product coming in. There's never ends. And so there's always new. So like even in the business, there's going to be another business in sub bubble tea. There's going to be another business, the lease market. So it just keeps going thing. It keeps building up. Same thing with world politics. The U.S. must change its mindset into infinite game, because China is going to make. What if China takes over? What if China becomes more powerful? What if China becomes more, those AI stuff? And we can't just have the mindset, going to have fear, and that's just what just having a finite mindset does not help you win.
Absolutely. And to be quite honest, I'm just going to speak honestly. I mean, I think China's already at this point anyway. I think China has already has surpassed that, or has surpassed in various fields in terms of education, in terms of manufacturing, being able to have when you literally are out. So look, when you go to the point when you run out of masks and you have to actually ask somebody where the coronavirus did start to, like, hey, can we have more masks? Like, and especially with this influence of China in Africa, them speaking to world leaders, Akon, all that. I mean, I think it's honestly game over. I think it's in the sense of America at this point is like Rome, because I remember with Rome, I'm a huge history buff. I love history. When Rome was at its decline, they had entertainment. They had entertainment in order to keep the people distracted. And we went as a society from, looking at politics and leaders and all that stuff to being influenced heavily by celebrity chefs.
Yes. Yes.
And when you're looking at celebrity chefs, you already know, you're like, but that every great empire has gone to that point. And it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, especially the long-term debt cycle. Ray Dalio wrote about it, like the long-term debt cycle, short-term debt cycle. That's normal, but with the current data, just the way how two parties demonize each other, and low interest rate and huge national debt, those things are all pointing toward like a decline. But at the same time, I don't want people who listen to this thing like we're doomed, because like America, I think like the financial structure and the way just the soil for business growth and all these things of technology are still there.
Right.
It's still better than any other country out there.
Absolutely.
It is still, but I do think like there needs some reform. Capitalism needs to some reform,
Yes.
and because no longer working for general public, because like people in the top 10% salaries are growing 5 to 10%, where people make 30 and below are like growing nothing. It's just like nothing. And people in the middle class are kind of growing by 1-2% like that. So it's obviously there's a great vacuum of money, like where's money going? And so we definitely need to have a reform or some sort.
Absolutely. That's and actually I think that covered like that last big question of what would you like to see change in America, man? And that's so good. I really love the points and everything that you did say. And so as we wrap this episode up, I got two last questions. Two. Yeah. So my first question would be, what are two things that you would tell yourself, your senior year of Baylor self? Mm-hmm. What are two things that you would tell yourself?
Do you just want me to answer the question about America? What you see in America?
Oh, do you still want to answer that?
I wasn't sure. So maybe I missed it. I wasn't sure if you still.
Oh, I thought that covered it. I thought you covered. But what would you like to see change?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is just to become infinite-minded. Become infinite-minded where we're going in this game that never ends.
Right.
So
yeah, I think you covered all of that. We covered about like the geopolitical and the social political and the financial political, and I think that really did cover that. That you answered. That's like the type of answer that I'm always looking for whenever somebody does talk about that. Whenever I ask that question, you did cover that beautifully.
Yeah, I think Waco. I think a lot of people in Waco don't think this far, but I feel like Waco is, in a sense, like Waco always often experience things maybe a year or plus behind everywhere else,
right,
in the West and East Coast. And I feel like in a way that kind of keeps people not realize what's going on around us, but these things are going to happen quick. And to your question, I think if I were to tell myself is I would explain myself kind of like the science behind storytelling. When I was in college, I was definitely very insecure. I was kind of like not very confident. I was anxious. And because it was until it probably took me about 2-3 years to learn about the power of storytelling. What does that mean? So like Bible is a story. Right. Bible is never a story. And always good story have a villain and so every emotion and every insecurity that I had was just a story that I made up that I didn't know how to I didn't know how story worked.
Right.
I would teach myself the elements, what makes a good story, and how can I tell a good story? Because when I tell a good story, when there's a good story, it changes how I think, how I behave, how I feel. It just changes everything. And it's just the same way how we read the Bible. You know, they're just a bunch of stories, but there has a point, it has a character, and we are kind of part of that too, and who God is, and all those things. I mean, I wish I knew how to read stories better.
Right. Right. That's awesome. That's great. Because I feel like that storytelling is such a skill. I mean, that is something that we've been doing for like since the dawn of humanity. They've
Yeah,
always told stories, and it's very important for this. Not only the stories do we hear, but the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think that goes back into how just like binary, how our mind works. Because if we continue to tell the story of our identity and what we are, and that's why, like, me as a Christian, it's so important to understand that how much life has been given to us through the Word. um, it is just so transformative because what you think does come out in life, and that story can influence and change another person's story, whether for good or for bad.
yeah, yeah. So the story is very much that, and yeah, I wish I knew better when I was younger, and yeah, and I felt like within every story, every good story has a guide, you know, like has a like Yoda, or
Right.
that one guy, I forgot his name, in Kill Katniss Everdeen. What's the story movie?
The Hunger Games.
You know, she meets a guide, and I think the story I'm writing right now in my life, I think I want to be more of a guide, because a guy who understands people's, able to offer empathy,
Right.
able to calm people down with their anxiety, and we also offer a solution to people. And so, you know, but yeah.
That's awesome. Now, my last question is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Um, I think I want to leave a legacy, even just with the business we're doing, is that everybody gets a voice on the table, and that they all have a place of belonging that they should deserve.
That's awesome. Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Well, this is my last segment. It's the Speak Life segment. Of course, James, there's power in the word. There's power in the mouth. You can speak life or death, and I think it's a great opportunity to speak life. So, Devin, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much again for being the leader that you are, being a man full of empathy and love, and a man of vulnerability, a man of who is willing to not only to be knowledgeable and truthful, and continuing to give that space and opportunity for people to be heard and to be able to feel welcome. People like you are what makes the world go round. By utilizing your talents, your ideas, and your mindset to be able to empower the people around you is very noble. And I want to let you know that I think it's very important for you to just want to say thank you so much, man, for all the work that you've done, for the listening that you're doing, and for just being a man of value and living out the gospel the way that Christ said that we should. And so those are your flowers, and I hope those words are able to lift you up, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, means a lot.
Well, anyway, y'all, that is it for episode 229. We are out.